Hello and welcome again to this edition of Florida Internet and Television's FLITV. I'm your host, Brad Swanson. We are coming to you from Andrew's Restaurant, which sits directly across from Florida's Capitol. So we are right here in the last week of the 2018 legislative session. I am joined by Matt Dixon of Politico Florida. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you. Best lunch buffet in the game here at Andrews.
I mean, obviously, do you have a dish named after you yet?
I'm working on it. Career goals.
Career goals,
yes,
right.
Yes.
I mean, we got to shoot high, right? Get the sandwich named after you by Andrews. So,
that's right.
Okay, so let's jump in. We as of 2 days ago, it was going to be Friday, but now where do we stand for session ending, and what are you seeing over there?
Well, gosh, 3 or 4 weeks ago, we were all saying this is one of the most boring sessions we've seen in a very long time. It was very slow. Everything was going along very well, and here we are, is often the case, the last week of session, and we're either extending, which we could, the session can't end Friday anymore. We've sort of missed some budget deadlines, so we're either extending into Saturday, or Speaker Corcoran said more than likely a special budget session on Monday. So at this point, we're not getting out on time. Things have kind
Tallahassee travel companies celebrating with the change fees and travels.
Well,
right?
but I feel like Tallahassee travel companies sort of bank their yearly budget around a budget collapse every year because they're very predictable. 3 out of the past 4 years, we haven't passed a budget on time, so here we are again.
All right, so what are the big issues causing the budget slowdown? What do you see?
It's 1 and 2. Well, it's the gun bill, I think, to an extent. The House still hasn't passed it, so I think there's some idea that they might hold off as of this morning, as of Wednesday morning. They still haven't passed their bill, and the budget still hasn't passed. So there's some idea that those two are connected.
Okay.
The idea that if you vote against the gun bill that leaders really like, it could hurt you in the budget. And 2, as is often the case, this is an annual one.
Right.
The hospitals and healthcare funding.
Right.
There's the House and the Senate at a stalemate over that pot of money specifically, which is sort of what's holding things up. 90% of the budget's done, maybe 95%, but there's this small piece with hospitals and healthcare funding that's sort of the last linchpin, and that's kind of an annual event. This gun bill stuff is brand new, but the hospital stuff is annual.
If you follow Politico Florida reporters and you look at what the tweets are, it's amazing, because when you look at the rest of the lobby corps and the folks that are invested in this process, they're basically just watching and waiting for the rest of the game, or if you will, to start back up again, for bills to start passing, because they're waiting for all of the gun bill to pass.
No, that's right. There's these long swaths. There's these 7 or 8 hour floor sessions where we're talking about 40 or 50 amendments on the gun bill. And most of the fourth floor crowd, while it's a huge issue and we all have to pay attention to it to an extent, professionally, the fourth floor guys, the sort of hallway creatures, don't necessarily care about it. So they'll be kind of mulling around, and it has a lot less of a frenetic pace this year than it would normally during a final week, because there's these long swaths where the floor is sort of off limits to bills that they care about.
Yeah, okay, so let's talk about bills that they care about that could potentially, once these kind of get moving, I mean, what do you see that's still alive that can make it out of the session?
I think it's going to be a trite answer, and you've probably heard it before, but I generally think right now it's sort of a 2-issue ballgame. It's the gun bill and the budget. We're going to see a lot of, like we did after the House was done talking about their gun bill yesterday, they passed off a raft of kind of lower tier issues in the weeds, perhaps some special interest food fight bills, but nothing terribly high profile. The issue is now through the lens of the gun bill and the budget. How are they interconnected, and when are we going to get out? Okay,
so let's transition. So once we get out, right, we're going into election mode. I mean, certainly you guys are a hallmark for folks to turn to find out what's going on in the elections. How is Politico Florida gearing up for the 2018 elections?
Well, I mean, we're taking notes now. We're gathering thread at this point to see how votes, how floor speeches, things like that, how things you do at the end of session are going to be messaged for or against you, once you're out on the campaign trail. And this gun bill is going to be a hallmark example. The Florida legislature has avoided...
It's going to be in every mailer.
It's avoided gun politics. It's avoided any gun control reform legislation for a very long time because it is such a hotbed political issue. Its hand was forced this year. So how that's going to intersect with the campaign trail is going to sort of be fascinating.
Yeah, okay, all right. So where do you go after it's over, whether it ends on Saturday or Monday? Where does Matt Dixon go?
The beach for 2 or 3 days, and then I'm going to spend a bunch of time in I-4 Corridor Holiday Inn conference rooms, listening to folks eating rubber chicken and listening to folks give their stump speeches.
Right. So, but of course, when you're on the beach, you're there with a good internet connection so that you can consistently keep your tweets.
I'm just snarkily tweeting about everyone around me.
Right. Hitting all the other folks. So when you think about Politico Florida versus traditional journalism that we see in Florida, how are you guys looking to cover either the end of session session or that political session differently?
Traditional media has done a phenomenal job here in the last 2 or 3 weeks of session post-Parkland, sort of capturing the mood of the place, but our focus is a little bit different. The things like the huge rallies, though we covered them, weren't necessarily our central focus. We were trying to figure out the policy in the bill, and we were trying to get a sense of it had the votes. We were more focused inside the building than outside of the building, and that's not to say one is more important than the other.
Right.
We just do have a different focus, to your point. So traditional media's done a phenomenal job in the end of session here, and we have some of the best papers in the country here, but we have had a different focus as far as looking at the policy and sort of the vote counts and things like that,
right,
as opposed to some of the needed theatrics around
right.
it.
Okay, but on different commentary, I mean, it is a big difference in the fact that people consume your product exclusively online, and it is real time. I mean, versus waiting for that paper to come out.
Sure.
I mean, how much does that drive your newsroom culture, if you will, or how does that change you?
Well, that's why there's a bit of a difference in strategy as far as that we have an exclusive element that it's a pay element, and so we're trying to produce content that others might not be.
Right.
So if there are newspaper reporters covering one thing that again probably needs coverage and that they should be focused there, we're going to try to ferret out a different element as far of and again I always look at it inside the building versus outside the building, and this was a perfect example where others had more resources outside covering the things going on, and we probably had more inside trying to figure out some of the policy and political angles of the legislation and sort of the post-Parkland atmosphere.
Okay, shameless plug. How do people get to your news content? What's the best way?
Politico.com/states/Florida, but the best way is Twitter, mdixon55.
All right, I was going to ask for the Twitter handle because it is one of the best Twitter handles in the Capitol to follow, not just for commentary, but for humor and pithy insight.
As my grandma always said, flattery will get you everywhere.
A few hand grenades thrown at a few other folks in the process, which is always fun. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining FLITV. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
And we look forward to having you on again soon. That's all the time we have for today's program. Thanks for tuning in to FLITV. But before you go, make sure you hit us up on our Twitter feed at FLInternetTV, and that's also on Facebook. And thanks for tuning in.